Story 1. He was my brother. He was given someone else's prescription morphine. He was not informed of the dangers or the safe dosage. He took 4 pills. We found him on Thanksgiving morning. He was in a coma until he died on December 6, 1996. It destroyed my family. My mother committed suicide in 1998. My father drank and smoked himself to death in 2019. My life was completely derailed for a while, but I am doing okay now. Story 2. Threw a can of pressurized aerosol bug spray into a campfire. It exploded and caused severe burns to his esophagus and lungs. He took about 10 days to die in the hospital. Terrible thing, I imagine. Story 3. We had many deaths at my school. 2 stand out. One student in my class shot himself after receiving a D in math. We were in middle school. He did it at home. Another student underwent surgery for a football injury, had an allergic reaction, and died. Story 4. The kid who used to bully me a bit wasn't overall a really bad kid. The week before, he had grabbed my collarbone and dragged me around the quad by it like it was a handle. It was still sore when he ran out in front of a car on a crossing and spent about a week in a coma before dying. We were only about 7 or 8, but when they went around the class trying to get us all to say our favorite memory of him, I couldn't think of anything. I just said he used to bully me, but I didn't want him to die. Everyone looked at me like I was a monster, and the teacher got flustered and moved on. Story 5. Undiagnosed brain aneurysm that ruptured while she was riding the school bus in 8th grade. The cemetery where she was buried was across the street from the high school, so we visited her grave often. I was not on the bus that day, but the stories of the chaos that followed were heartbreaking to hear from the students who were there. Story 6. When I was in grade school, we had a sweet little boy who died of brain cancer. Life certainly is not fair. Story 7. In 6th grade, they were playing tag at school. A child climbed a tree and fell headfirst. They did not survive the trip to the hospital. Story 8. Murder-suicide. The mother shot her son, her husband, and her daughter, then herself. The father and sister survived, but the son and mother died. Story 9. He had cancer. He was getting better, but his port became infected during a change, and he died. He was my best friend, and I still feel his absence 10 years later. Story 10. Dengue fever. She had gone back to her family home in the Philippines over summer holidays and became very ill. Her last social media post was, "Her name is going to die with this fever." And she passed away less than 24 hours later. Story 11. Cancer. He was the school bully, so everyone was happy he was gone from school until he died. Then we all felt guilty. Surprisingly, the priest at the Catholic school mentioned it during the weekly Ask the Priest Anything hour. He said, "He was a bully, and many of you disliked him, but you didn't kill him. You didn't give him cancer. Remember that and don't blame yourselves. But don't forget him. Bullies aren't happy. They may act that way because their family lives are difficult or because they don't like themselves. He was young and had a whole life ahead of him. He might have changed. Don't forget him and try not to judge him. That is for God." 50 years later, I still remember that day. Story 12. One person burned to death after finding some paint thinners in an industrial dumpster, lighting a match to a 5-liter drum, causing an explosion. It took about a week for him to die from his burns. I think about him every Halloween when the accident happened. Story 13. He was chasing his intoxicated father to save him from trying to drive. The two crossed the road and were hit by a truck. Story 14. He loved to tool around town on his motor scooter while listening to his portable cassette player. A car did not notice him until too late, and he did not hear the car horn. He was hit and died at the scene. She was not one of the popular kids. She disappeared one summer day. A search turned up nothing. A couple of months later, a farmer harvesting his field found her. She took a bottle of sleeping pills, used a backpack as a pillow, and went to sleep watching the sky. Story 15. Collapsed and died during a physical education lesson due to an undiagnosed heart issue. Very surprising as they were a keen runner. The physical education teacher who tried to revive them went on sick leave not long after, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and cancer apparently. Story 16. She had an asthma attack on a school-sponsored ice skating outing, and the ambulance could not get her to the county hospital on time. She was already blue with bright red, panicked eyes when they took her away. The problem was that we were told to leave everything at school, so if we fell on the ice, the things in our pockets would not cause injury. She left her inhaler behind. Story 17. His father strangled him to death with his own pajamas while he was sleeping. The father had some mental health issues, and in a psychotic episode, he murdered his own son. When he realized what he had done, he ran down the street shouting that he had just killed his son. He went to prison and hanged himself there. Story 18. When I was younger, around middle school, a high school student died after being hit by a train while playing a dangerous game called chicken. A few years after I graduated, a young elementary school boy committed suicide due to relentless bullying. Story 19. Leukemia. He was 17 when it came back. He looked awful, just skin and bones, but still cheered everyone on. Guys, it will all be good again. 2 months later, he died. I'll never forget how his mother stroked his hair while he lay in the casket, as if he was just asleep. His huge dad, a military man, was broken down crying. 22 years later, it still haunts me. I miss him. Story 20. Similar. Had a burning passion for soccer and was by far the most talented player in the school. Had a congenital heart condition and was told he could not play by the doctors. Parents got a second opinion and he played. His heart gave out on the field. Story 21. Our school guidance counselor was married to a very wealthy man. They had a son, Brett, who was spoiled, good-looking, and popular. Maybe a little entitled and unpleasant, but far less than you would expect. Overall, a decent person. Brett started dating a girl who was poor. Her family shared a house with 3 other families so they could send their kids to this school district. Brett's mother did not approve at all. She was not shy about saying so. She loathed this girl. The longer Brett kept seeing her, the angrier she became. Then Brett and the girl decided to attend the same university. The mother was extremely upset. Halfway through senior year, before any of it could really come to a head, Brett died in a car accident. I never saw the mother again. I never saw the girl again. They quit and switched schools, respectively. It was an unexpectedly tragic end to the story we had all been following. Anytime I think about Brett, I think about how much his mother must regret that she spent the last few months of his life bitterly fighting him over something as trivial as loving a girl whose parents were in a different income bracket. Story 22. Our school used to have early morning and evening swimming practice for the school swimming team members. When I say early morning, I mean 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Afraid of punishment, the girls would hurry out of their dorms to the pool quickly. One day, one girl, we still aren't sure if she was sleepy or suicidal, jumped from the topmost diving board straight into an empty pool. The water had been drained the night before. Everyone was left wondering if she thought there was water or if she just jumped. Story 23. I studied with a child who was born HIV positive and developed acquired immunodeficiency syndrome because his parents were drug users. During the last 3 years of high school, he underwent 3 surgeries and had almost 40% of his lungs removed. As you can imagine, many people bullied him. Mind you, he was not easy to deal with either. He grew up in a foster home and was socially inept, but my group of friends and I always tried to help him fit in as much as we could. By 2009, we all graduated, and we did not hear from him again except for occasional gossip and sightings on the streets until 2017. A friend of mine was volunteering at a nonprofit organization that worked with homeless people and found him in a food line. By then, he had been living on the streets for a long time, and not much could be done. As many of us still kept in contact, one day we gathered donations and gave him everything he would need to survive for a long time. He was very thankful and shared more about his life, including how the foster care system let him go after he turned 18. Not even 2 days later, another volunteer called my friend to say that this young man had gotten into a fight at the shelter and was expelled. As he was leaving the building, he fell and hit his head on the curb, dying instantly. Story 24. Suicide. Approximately grade 4. He told everyone in his class that he would not be coming to school anymore. We were children and did not understand what he meant until the next day when an official announcement was made at the school assembly. Story 25. There was a drunk driver who hit a vehicle carrying 5 of my high school football teammates. 4 of them passed away immediately, and the 5th barely survived, spending months in the hospital. This tragedy shook our community deeply. I still think about them, and to this day, I would rather fight someone for their keys if they tried to drive home drunk than let them drive. Story 26. Brain cancer. I don't even know how to describe this girl. Bear in mind this was the 1980s. She was as girly as they come and could still hang with the guys. She was everyone's friend. And one day she disappeared. We later found out she had brain cancer, but back then we never thought of the word terminal. Then suddenly, after a year, she came back wearing a terrible wig. We all knew it was a bad wig, but it made her feel more human. We were just happy to have her back. Easily 6 months after she returned to school, she was gone. I was a pallbearer at her funeral. Worst day of my life. Story 27. The kid was my brother. He fell face first onto about 6 inches of rebar. It pushed past his left eye, penetrated his brain, and stopped at the back of his skull on the right. His heart had stopped when my mom found him, pulled him off, and called an ambulance. The ambulance crew didn't believe what had happened. It was 1990. Because there was no visible trauma after the eye went back into place, they managed to get his heart going again. His heart stopped another 3 times in the hospital. They had to fly an army surgeon over from Northern Ireland, who specialized in gunshot wounds to the head, to perform the brain surgery. My brother lived and will be 40 next year. Not bad for someone who died 4 times. To add injury to injury, 4 years after his first accident, 1994, age 8, he stole my mom's cigarette lighter early one morning to try a lighter trick he'd seen. He got it severely wrong and ended up with full-thickness burns on 52% of his body. When he was 12, his seatbelt failed during a crash, and he went through the windscreen. He was totally unscathed. 1 accident every 4 years. Luckily, his 16th year went by without a hitch. Story 28. First grade. A kid from my class passed away in a house fire. I remember asking my teacher where he was after he hadn't been in class for a week. She took me out into the hall and told me he had gone to heaven. When I told my mom about it after school, she asked for the boy's name. I told her, and it turned out she had read how he died in the newspaper. I lost it after that and cried for hours. I wasn't very close to the boy, but we played together at recess occasionally, and I considered everyone in my classroom my friend. It took me a while to get over it. I kept thinking about how horrible a death that must have been. Story 29. He got drunk on a cruise and tried to impress some girls by jumping from the aft terrace deck. There was no deck below. Story 30. Leukemia, weeks from being 12. I had known him for 3 years. I was always sitting next to him because I never got sick and was adamant about keeping my hands and belongings clean, so our teacher seated me next to him. I was 11 when they sent all of us home with a sealed note for our parents. Somehow I just knew what it said, so I handed it to my mother and went off to watch television. I still think about him. I think 11-year-old me refused to acknowledge he was gone. I was the only one in our year who did not go to his funeral. I will forever regret that. Story 31. Content warning. Graphic description. In middle school, 8th grade, her mother's boyfriend tied her, her siblings, and her mother up in the basement and beat them to death with a pole. One person managed to escape, her aunt. However, by the time her aunt reached the police, they were all dead, and the killer tried to flee but was caught. No child or parent deserves that kind of death. Story 32. There were 2 identical twins in my high school. Everyone knew them because they were always together and both had heterochromia, but inversed, which is how we could tell them apart. One day, I came to school and was told that one of them suddenly died while playing football in front of the other. The second twin did not come to school for a while. I can only imagine how it must feel to see your brother drop dead in front of you. Story 33. Suicide. She was a kind, beautiful, popular girl. Everyone loved her, and no one had any idea she was struggling. I only knew her because her brother used to bully me on the school bus. She was a sweetheart. I remember the teachers crying that day. Story 34. He was walking home from a poker night at a friend's house. He was found floating in the river the next morning. No one knows what happened. Was he drunk and slipped into the water? Was he attacked because he was by himself? Did he do it himself? He was an only child, and no one had a bad thing to say about him. He shocked us all deeply. Story 35. Lying on the train tracks. They never determined if it was suicide or if he passed out. But sitting on the tracks near his house while drinking was something he did often. Story 36. The kid was a neighborhood hopper. He threw up gang signs to gangs he was not a part of and directed them at the wrong person. He was followed home and shot in the back of the head. Gangs are foolish, and pretending to be in one is even worse. Story 37. A crane fell on her during a major construction project when I was a child. She was on the way to school with her father. I will never forget that morning. Story 38. I grew up in rural Germany. Almost half of my graduation class of 20 people, 9 are dead now that I am 37. A fair number of them died due to alcohol, other drugs, or operating a motor vehicle. The last one was a woman who died because she developed sepsis during a water birth without proper supervision. One of them had cancer and decided not to treat it. Story 39. Not me, but a friend. He was on a school trip to Europe from the United Kingdom. The Channel ferry they were on capsized, killing around half of the kids from the trip, plus many others. He tried to save his best friend but failed and watched him being swept away. Story 40. Drank out of a can of Coca-Cola with a wasp inside. It stung the inside of his throat, which swelled and blocked his airway. 7th grade. Story 41. Suicide. He posted online that he was going to do it. Someone from his class saw the post and went to his house, but it was already too late. His parents thanked that person at the funeral. I do not think they ever knew he was one of the people who bullied him. Story 42. He had a hole in the heart from birth. He experienced some kind of internal bleeding one weekend. 14 out of 15. Lovely child as well. Rest in peace, Michael. Story 43. Asthma attack at a bus stop at 16 years old. Only child of an older refugee single mother with no other family in the country. I felt devastated for her mother. Story 44. A really kind, smiley young man was dating my friend. We played volleyball together. One weekend, the 3 of us and a few others all hung out. Things were normal and fine. The next week, we found out her boyfriend had hanged himself in his closet. He was 16 years old. It still haunts me to this day. Story 45. Fell from the 4th floor. The worst part was that he was basically paralyzed and lay in bed for 5 years straight until his death. Story 46. A student at my high school was at the beach with his father, girlfriend, and dog. Their dog got sucked into the ocean, and the student and his father went in after it to help. The dog came back alive. The father and son did not. Story 47. Suicide. He tried to take his own life twice. He was repeatedly sent to mental health facilities until people forgot about him. Then he tried again and succeeded. He was only 14. Story 48. His mother came to pick him up from school. He normally walked home. She parked across the street, saw him, and called his name. He turned and ran to her but was hit by a school bus. About half the school witnessed the accident. Story 49. He got high and crashed his car. Ironically, his memorial slideshow included pictures of him rolling cannabis cigarettes. Story 50. 2 people fell through the ice of a frozen lake. They routinely drove on the lake, and the spot where they fell had weakened that day. He was found in a posture helping her out of the water. She was found about 100 yards from a house. Rest in peace, Jackie and Evan. Story 51. Got into a fight after school, was hit over the head with a rod, and knocked unconscious. This affected his previously undiagnosed heart condition, leading to cardiac arrest and death. Story 52. Got drunk and dove headfirst into shallow water. He received a large candlelight vigil on the football field and a giant bulletin board covered in paper for people to sign. A month earlier, a student died by suicide due to bullying. All he received was a brief moment of silence during the morning announcements, with no mention of the bullying that led to it. That student was not the most valuable player on the junior varsity football team, so, according to the principal who had a son on the varsity football team, it was treated differently. Story 53. The stepfather murdered the entire family. The mother was being beaten. 3 children stepped in to help. One by one, he threw them down cement stairs and stabbed one. One child was in 8th grade, and another was hit by a school bus in 11th grade. Both were in my grade. Story 54. A cheerleader was killed by a friend. The local police did not know what they were doing, so they brought in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was the early 1980s. The police, media, students, and teachers thought it was an outcast, or in my case, a punk rocker. 2 of us went through hell being accused and harassed for months. Her family, of course, was very upset. It turned out to be someone in her group who did it. Both I and the other accused girl ended up leaving the school for good. Story 55. A kid in my junior high was taking a nap in his bed. His father came home, shot the kid, shot the mother, shot the dog, and then shot himself. Story 56. My best friend was walking to another one of our close friends' houses when he was hit by a distracted driver who then drove for another 10 miles before she was caught. I did not find out until I was at school the next day, waiting for him to get off the bus. He was supposed to graduate high school 2 years early and only had 3 more weeks until that goal. I still miss him every day. Story 57. I did not know the man personally, but he died from inhaling lighter gas. 5 years later, I met a woman at university who is now my fiancée. One day, we were casually talking about the same topic, and I mentioned the man. It turned out he was her first cousin. It is sad. Story 58. He was burned in the heat of the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. There was an aerial photograph in the newspaper of his body in the back of a pickup truck before anyone identified him. Story 59. Decapitation in a bus and tractor collision. Edit. The tractor had baler forks or something similar attached to it. Story 60. Everyone who died in my school was either murdered or died in a car crash. The one that stands out, though, is from middle school. My girlfriend at the time's niece accidentally hung herself while swinging from the closet. However, the news article initially had the headline, "Girl, 5, raped and hung." We were young, and it created a disturbing atmosphere over the school. 2 days later, the statement was retracted, and the article explained what actually happened. It is still incredibly sad. Story 61. Car accident at 14 years old. I was in the back seat when the car slipped on ice, causing it to slide into the oncoming lane where we were T-boned. I was the driver of the car at 17 years old. Story 62. His girlfriend was 17. He was 18. This relationship is legal in my state. The girlfriend's stepfather found out they had sex, was angry about it, and told the boy that he was calling the police and that he would go to prison for statutory rape. The boy jumped off a bridge. Story 63. One child died by suicide due to bullying that the school was aware of but failed to address. Everyone at the school pleaded with the head teacher to exclude the bully. The police were present twice a week. The bully's parents consistently threatened legal action and physical violence if the school took any measures. The victim eventually took his own life at a construction site where the bully's father worked, leaving a note detailing everything that had happened. The bully was finally excluded and arrested. The bully's family home was attacked, their cars were vandalized, and the father was frequently assaulted in public. The bully and his family were forced to leave the county. Instead of taking responsibility and apologizing, they escalated the situation by threatening to burn down the school, assault teachers, and harm the parents of other children. This is an example of vigilante justice in action. Story 64. Where to start? The joke is that my school feels like a final destination. I had a graduating class of over 700, and nearly 300 of us were gone before graduation. There was the kid who was killed execution style in the middle of the street after protecting his younger brother from getting beaten up. That is a cold case that still has not been solved. There was the group of kids who died in a house fire. One young man never woke up from a nap. He had a brain injury nobody knew about. My best friend died from diabetic complications. He went to take a nap and never woke up. Several car accidents occurred. A couple of drug overdoses. There was a girl who hanged herself in the auditorium while practicing the school play one year. Story 65. Suicide. He was a Muslim student at a Christian school. His parents enrolled him because they wanted a religious environment, but there were no Muslim schools available. The school and police conducted a full investigation to determine if there was any bullying or evidence of hate crimes against him, but found nothing. It seemed the student was simply unhappy. The dean held an assembly to discuss what happened and inform everyone about available therapy counselors for those who needed support. He apologized for failing to create an emotionally safe campus and for allowing a child to be so unhappy under his watch. He had to stop halfway through his speech because he became too emotional, and the assistant dean finished the assembly. All classes were canceled for the rest of the week, and the school brought in therapy dogs to sit in the commons for people to pet. Story 66. I did not find out about it until years later, but a senior this past year in my high school's family had a tragic history. His mother reportedly murdered his older sister and injured his 7-year-old brother in 2020. Last year, she was found not guilty due to mental illness. Story 67. Thrown from the 20th floor by wealthy individuals after being drugged at a party. Made big international news. Ivana Smith, if you are interested. I literally went to class with her every day. Then I did not. The wealthy individuals got away with it, last I heard. Story 68. A car full of people was driving home after school. The passenger in the front seat was a bit of a class clown and thought it would be funny to yank the driver's arm. This caused the driver to swerve into a wall and ricochet into the other lane. The car collided head-on with another vehicle that had 2 people inside. Thankfully, of the 7 people involved in the crash, only the person who caused it died. Story 69. A teacher fell down a flight of stairs and hit his head on the way down. He passed away about a week later. In the month leading up to it, he was complaining about memory issues and became extremely distracted during class. For example, he spent half a lesson talking about Christmas light bulbs in an algebra class. In the last lesson, he told us that his wife was getting worried and wanted him to see a doctor. Looking back, I think it was the beginning of dementia. Story 70. He and most of his family burned to death in a trailer fire. I think only his father survived. I never liked the man, but nobody deserves to die like that. Rest in peace, Carson. Story 71. We lost a very sweet and loving second grader at the school where I work. He and his cousin found their parents' drug stash and overdosed on fentanyl, obviously not knowing what it was. This happened a few years ago. I miss that little boy every day. Story 72. Back in high school in the 1990s, there was a widespread wave of kidnappings of Filipino-Chinese citizens in the capital. My classmates literally stopped coming to school. Their families either went into hiding out of fear, migrated to the United States or Canada, or worse, were kidnapped themselves. We did not really know what was happening, and the schools were not saying anything. Dismissals were carried out in almost a military fashion, and there was police presence everywhere. Despite all these efforts, some of the students who disappeared, as we eventually discovered, had indeed been kidnapped. Even with their families paying ransom, they were murdered, and their bodies were found in the fields of a province outside the capital. Our entire school was distraught. Even if we did not know them personally, something as tragic and gruesome as that shakes you. Story 73. He tried to sneak out to see his girlfriend and did not want the engine of his truck to wake anyone up, so he decided to push it up a hill. The truck ended up rolling forward and pinned him against a tree. From what I remember, he was a great guy, a star athlete, and nice to everyone. Story 74. We had a few incidents between middle and high school. One friend of mine was in 7th grade. Another was in 8th grade. A car accident in front of the school killed a student in 8th grade. In 10th grade, there was a suicide. In 11th grade, there was a 4-wheeler accident. In 11th grade, a friend of mine died of cancer. Story 75. I hated this kid. He bullied me regularly, got hold of a note I wrote to a girl and read it to everyone. Nobody seemed to care, which was fine. When he ended his life, I wasn't bitter. I felt genuinely bad. A lot of people I liked talking to also liked him. That same week, I went to our local youth group, and someone had asked the pastor to say a prayer for him. The pastor responded that because the kid ended his life, he was burning in hell for all eternity. I firmly believe this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mostly went to that youth group because they had it so you could hang out for a while and then leave when the service started, but I stayed when they began the service first. After the pastor said that, I left. If anyone should be burning in hell, it's that pastor. Story 76. Suicide. She was in 5th grade and had a twin. It was horrible. To this day, I can't believe a 10-year-old would end their own life. 10 years is so short. Story 77. A tire swing accident at an elementary school resulted in a wood chip piercing her brain, and she passed away in the hospital. Story 78. Drive-by shooting during freshman year. He was really good at mathematics and loved Family Guy. He was my best friend, and I think about him every day, even though it has been 15 years. Story 79. This was tough. I grew up in California, so the schools were all outside, and there were heavy-duty concrete benches dotted around the campus. In the 6th grade, a group of boys would jump from bench to bench in some sort of game. One kid slipped and hit his windpipe directly on the corner of a bench. I never actually knew the kid, but the whole community was devastated. Story 80. He was 13 and hanged himself because of a 2-day exclusion from school. He was a troubled kid who was angry, and he caused havoc every day. My mom told me he was growing up in an abusive family. Sometimes, his father was so drunk he would forget to pick him up after school or drop him off at 5 a.m. in the cold winter, although school started at 8 a.m. So my mom took him in our car so he could get some shelter. He was nice to me because of this. He wasn't actively bullying me. He was so afraid his father would punish him because of the school suspension that he killed himself when he came home. I was skiing with relatives when he passed away, on the first day of the winter holidays. It felt surreal, me skiing while this little boy was dead, probably feeling lonely and vulnerable at the very end of his life. I think about him often, even though we were not close, because I imagine the what if. He would be 30 now, might have a family of his own, but he will forever be a neglected 13-year-old boy. Story 81. In elementary school, one of my classmates and her family were killed in a murder-suicide by their father. They planted a tree out front in memorial, and the last time I went by the school, they had removed it to create a car pickup and drop-off loop. It is a sad reminder of how short people's memories can be. In high school, a couple of guys died from heart issues. They were both very large boys. There were also a couple of overdoses shortly after high school. Unfortunately, it was not just one. Story 82, he drowned while swimming. We held a swimming competition every year to remember him. Another person committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. His best friend was institutionalized, released, then hung himself the next day. Story 83, lightning strike at high school. 4 students were struck, but only one died. Her mother passed away from cancer the previous month. Story 84. Someone in my year level had an acting career that was cut short by their death. Towards the end of school, they tripped and fell in front of a train. At the next television awards in our country, they received a mention in the memorials. A plaque was also placed in our primary school in their honor. I did not know them very well, but had some conversations with them before they started acting during primary school and when they returned during high school. Story 85. Septicemic. She, about 8 years old, was healthy and had no pre-existing conditions. It was just a sudden general infection, as far as I know. I am not a doctor and am not very close with her family. Story 86. I do not know her personally, but there was a girl in my middle school who slipped during gym class and hit her neck on the bench. She died on the spot in front of her classmates before the ambulance arrived. They were in 6th or 7th grade. Story 87. 1. Suicide by hanging. He was a senior when I was a sophomore. 2. Gunshot to the head. The crazy part is all these years later they never found who did it. Nice guy. I think he was a senior when I was a junior. 3. He was riding an all-terrain vehicle and someone had strung up wire between 2 trees. He died immediately, I am pretty sure he was decapitated. This kid was a few years younger than me but had a sister in my grade. Story 88. She got pregnant in middle school. From what I heard, she had very religious parents who did not believe in abortion. She was forced to continue the pregnancy. She attended class almost up to her due date and kept saying she would return to school shortly after the delivery. She died during childbirth. It is unclear what happened to her child. Story 89. His family was moving about a mile down the road. They loaded mattresses into the back of a pickup truck. He climbed on top to catch a ride to the new house. The wind caught the mattress and it flew out of the truck, carrying him with it. Story 90. I remember a kid from high school who died at his first job site. He was reportedly left unsupervised while working with a rock crusher machine. His clothing got caught and he was pulled into the machine and crushed to death. It was a brutal way to die. He was only 18. I couldn't believe it when I heard the news. He seemed like an intelligent person. There was another young man from high school who decided to climb onto the roofs of businesses alone after a night of drinking. I suspect they were trying to break and enter. They slipped, fell, and were found dead in an alley below. Story 91. The child was my girlfriend. She remained 20 forever. Leukemia. Childhood best friend turned lovers. Good days. It has been 4 years but felt like yesterday. The other was our classmate. Car crash on the day of our senior high school graduation. The other had a rare type of cerebral palsy where patients typically live only until 18. She died at 20, not because of her condition, but due to COVID-19. Story 92. Beaten, tortured, and killed after being knocked off his trail bike while riding in bushland about 1 kilometer from his home. Story 93. Teacher here. The first student had a heart defect. What I heard from staff is that he got out of bed, told his mother he was not feeling well, and collapsed. It was his senior year. The second student was sitting in a car late at night. According to police, he was approached by someone and shot to death while sitting in the vehicle. He was 17, I believe. Both students were amazing, and I think of them often. Rest in peace, Quan. Rest in peace, Johnny. Story 94. Suddenly dropped to the ground during break time from a cardiac arrest. It was over 20 years ago, but I still remember her face, the memorial, and everything so clearly. Rest in peace, Emma. Story 95. He was playing at the docks by the river, dipping his feet in the water and making footprints when he fell in and got caught by the current. He was 5 years old. He was my bully, and I remember feeling relieved when it happened. It gave me some uncomfortable feelings towards myself and death in later years. Story 96. Defending his mother from his stepfather, who was trying to kill her. The father killed him and then took his own life. The school named an award after him that they give to students at the end of each year. He was only 14 years old. Rest in peace, Anthony. Story 97. He and his sister went on an interstate trip with their father, who was a truck driver. All of them fell asleep, including their father, and they crashed. The father survived. This incident completely changed the rest of the school year. The young man was loved by everyone. Story 98. She died during heart surgery. The poor girl spent her final day at school telling her friends she knew she would die. There was no doubt in her mind. Our year was called into an assembly the next morning to confirm she had passed away. She had been receiving treatments and surgeries on her heart since she was very young. But unfortunately, they could not save her this time. She was no older than 14. As far as I remember, she always loved dance and acting and wanted to pursue them as an adult. Story 99. I have 2 stories. Schools in Southern California started shutting down early on days that were really hot or had bad smog. There was no warning. They just sent the kids home. One day, a boy went home with some friends and took his father's handgun. He removed the magazine and pointed the gun at his friends. They understandably became upset. He said, "It's not loaded," placed it to his temple and fired the chambered round. After I graduated, my brother's friends invited him to a party. He couldn't go for some reason, probably grounded. The friends were coming home from the party when they were T-boned at an intersection by a man street racing. The man was driving a modified Chevrolet Camaro with a racing seat and 5-point harness. He survived. The 4 kids in the compact economy car with regular seatbelts all died. Secure your firearms. If you want to race, find a track. Story 100. I lost my 15-year-old only son to a 1-pill can kill fentanyl poisoning a little over a year ago. He was the best. He thought he bought MDMA on an app. Actually, he did buy MDMA, but it was pressed on a dirty press that had enough fentanyl in it to kill him. I will miss him with all of my heart for the rest of my days. Story 101. A boy fell from the top floor of a double-decker bus while it was taking him to school. He was fatally injured and died that night. If I recall correctly, there was a fight over nothing, and he ended up getting pushed through a window. The other case was even sadder. A 17-year-old girl, fit and healthy, died in her sleep with no known pre-existing conditions. She was very kind and had an incredible future ahead of her. Rest in peace, Nina. Story 102. I might win this one. A kid in about 4th grade put a blood pressure cuff around his neck and pumped it up while sitting on the toilet. He didn't know how to release the pressure. He passed out and died. Story 103. He was attacked by 3 men and a woman after a house party they and I had attended earlier that night. They caught him walking home alone, beat him severely, and left him unconscious across a set of train tracks. It was well known in my city what had happened. The police did nothing. It took them 10 years to follow up, with all of them eventually being charged with murder. The trial involved many half-truths and outright lies by some shady local characters. I had been good friends with one of the witnesses for the accused until he broke into my pregnant girlfriend's and my apartment and robbed us while we were at work. If I recall correctly, only one person was convicted, and it was for a lesser charge. It was a complete mess from the start and an absolute travesty. My heart breaks for his mother, who championed his cause for over a decade. I knew him casually, a truly kind person, a truly horrific tragedy. I hope you are resting easy, Aaron. Story 104. Working on a farm, he was crushed by a feeder he was transporting. He was a genuinely lovely man, and I often think about how life would have been for him if he were still alive. Story 105. Love. I had a friend in primary school who fell in love with a girl. The girl's brother found out, kidnapped him, beat him to death, and dropped the body in the river. Story 106. He was stealing from the boys' locker room. The gym teacher caught him, slammed him against a locker, and a brain aneurysm burst. Story 107. Accidentally hung himself with his school uniform tie while fooling around. The school uniform policy was changed to remove the tie after that. Story 108. I lived near and shared a bus with this one girl for many years when I was a kid. She was a year older than me, so there were a few years when we didn't see each other. But we remained friendly acquaintances and eventually friends over time. We hung out a few times in middle school and high school in groups, but I don't claim to be one of her close friends. She was, in a word, amazing. At the risk of putting her on a pedestal, she was like a television character in a larger-than-life way. Beautiful, funny, talented. She sang solos at many school concerts and was a skilled musician, intelligent and a very good student. On paper and in outward presentation to the world, she was perfect. In truly tragic fashion, her sister reportedly found her hanging from a tree in the woods near her house one autumn day of her junior year. All evidence pointed toward suicide. I won't speculate about what personal demons she was struggling with, as I didn't know her that well. Suffice it to say, she wasn't happy beneath her polished public image. It makes me sad to think of her grappling with severe depression, as revealed by her sister after the fact, among whatever other private struggles she had. I was a sophomore and she was a junior, and the last time I saw her was on the bus going home. Then the news spread on our social media all evening. The entire junior class held a mass ceremony to honor her in the parking lot behind the high school. They organized a walkout and went outside together to mourn. We could look out at them through the classroom windows, and you could see the pain and shock even from a distance. At her wake, her parents made a tribute video showing her life from childhood pictures and videos, showcasing her growth into the talented young woman she was. It ended with a video of her singing a solo at a school concert from the previous year, and it was so heartbreakingly beautiful. We all cried. Not to start a conversation about suicide, but she changed the way I viewed it, and I will never forget her. Rest in peace, friend. Story 109. One kid? No, let's try one every year. First year. The captain of the football team was drunk, riding a motorcycle, and ended up crashing into a telephone pole during the first week of school. Second year. She fell off the back of a motorboat, and the propeller sliced through her chest. Third year. He was driving home on Christmas Eve from church with two friends when a dump truck ran a stop sign, rolled over their car, ripped open the gas tank, and burned them alive. Fourth year, he got drunk at a bush party. He made the smart decision not to drive and walked home instead. He passed out on the way, fell onto the road, and a car came along and decapitated him. The kicker. The driver of the car in the fourth year incident was the father of the girl from the second year. Story 110. He shot himself in the stomach, believing it would take 6 hours to die, leaving time for his parents to find and save him. They found him in the front yard when they got home late. Story 111. That kid was actually my neighbor. After a night of going out, he got a lift back home. However, he presumably got into an argument with the driver and was forced out of the car in the middle of the German Autobahn, where he was hit by a car and died on impact. Story 112. I'm a high school teacher. We had a suicide a year and a half ago. She was a new girl and had not made many friends or connections yet. I do not know details since I was one of the adults, but the fact that the whole school moved on and acted like nothing happened within 2 days hurt in a way I could not explain. Nobody changed. There was no support between students. Faculty pretended that it had not happened. I understand that nobody really knew her that much, but how do you not acknowledge the obvious issue here? Suicide is not something that should just happen in day-to-day life. That has stayed with me more than the one kid who died in my graduating class. She was hit and killed by a drunk driver, in case you care. Story 113. The town I'm from shuts down on Halloween, and the entire town becomes a teen vandal zone where the town's rich teens destroy property, vehicles, toilet paper homes, and fight people. No, I'm not joking. It's a real thing. When I was in high school, parents supplied alcohol to local teens for a Halloween night party. I was invited, but my parents refused to let me go. I sat at our kitchen window and watched as my friends' vehicles drove by, honking. 2 hours later, my parents' police scanner was going wild. A wreck. Driving under the influence. Teens killed. 2 years later, my mom's best friend died in an accident when her designated driver was unknowingly under the influence. A year after that, my cousin's husband was struck and killed by a drunk driver. She was 8 months pregnant. I don't drink alcohol. Alcohol kills. Story 114. Which one? One hanged himself with bedsheets in juvenile detention. One was accidentally shot by his best friend while playing with guns. One hanged himself from the tallest tree at the school, so it took a crew to bring him down. One died by running a three-wheeler into a barbed wire fence and bleeding out. Story 115. He electrocuted himself while handling a video home system player. It is unclear exactly what caused the electrocution or what component was faulty. Story 116. One of my best friends growing up went to a different college for freshman year. He had a bad experience with a hallucinogenic mushroom and jumped out of his dorm window on the 15th floor. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.